This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
Warning. This episode contains descriptions of medical procedures that may be distressing to some listeners. I'm Georgia and welcome to Finding Hope, the podcast that swaps out the depressing news headlines for stories of hope that won't make the front page. Each episode we meet someone who's got a story of hardship and pain, but has found hope and healing along the way. Hopefully, they inspire you to look for the good in your own life too. Episode 4, Rachel Taufer. All Rachel Taufer ever wanted was to be a mum, specifically a mum of 4 kids. She'd imagined that exact scenario from the time she was a little girl. So when Rachel became pregnant with her 4th child, she was over the moon, until her world turned upside down. What happens when a pregnancy goes wrong? What do you do when you can't keep your baby safe? When you're told that either you or your baby will survive, but not both of you? How do you cope with that? Let's find out. Rachel, tell me a bit about yourself.
Primarily, I'm a mum, but I also do teach a couple of days a week. And if I get any me time, I do like to do some writing and exercising. But my main focus is my family, so my children.
Take me back to the moment where you found out you were pregnant with Estelle, your 4th child. What was that like?
With our first 3 children, I found out before my husband Nathan found out that I was pregnant, because I'd done the test and he wasn't there at the time. And obviously I told him straight after, but we knew that 4 would be our number. So we had been trying, we've been praying for this 4th baby to complete our family. I got up early with him and did the pregnancy test with him there, and we both waited with lots of anticipation. And when we saw the second faint line, we were just both really excited. I've always wanted 4 children. Ever since I was a little kid, I always knew I wanted 4 children. So just felt like this baby was the missing piece to our family.
The excitement and joy was short-lived. Rachel's 3 previous pregnancies had progressed largely without complications. But just a few weeks into this 4th pregnancy, things started to go wrong.
When I was 7 weeks pregnant with our 4th, I was having one of those moments where I was exhausted, I felt overwhelmed. I had 3 other young children at home with me, and I went to the bathroom, and when I looked down, there was just so much red. I was bleeding a lot, and I thought, with that much blood, there's no chance that I'm still pregnant. I thought I must be miscarrying. I wasn't sure what to do. I'd never experienced this, and I had this thought that I'm going to be one of those women now that people talk of but not talk to, because this is a trauma to lose a baby. This is a huge thing to grieve, losing a child. And I didn't want to be in that category, because no one wants to be someone who's lost a baby. So I called Nathan and told him, you need to come home. I called a midwife that I knew, and she said I needed to call an ambulance. And then I called my obstetrician. By the time Nathan got home, I was in the fetal position on the floor, crying and praying, please don't take my baby away. The paramedics arrived at the same time that Nathan did, and his mother came as well. And they basically told us there's really nothing we can do. You're too early into the pregnancy. If this is a miscarriage, the best thing to do is go see your obstetrician. So the drive to see our obstetrician it felt like it took forever. And then walking through the rooms, seeing all the other pregnant bellies that were clearly a lot further along than we were, knowing that, I might have just lost my baby. It was incredibly tough. But then when I did see the obstetrician, he did an internal scan, and we held our breath, and he played the audio, and there was a heartbeat. So our baby was still in there, and our baby was still very much alive and with us. But he then said, we need to find out why you're bleeding. So he continued to scan, and he found a subchronic hematoma, which is essentially a bleed in the uterus, and it was sitting right next to our baby. So he said, you need to go home and onto bed rest, and I'll see you weekly for scans. But apart from that, you need to be in bed. You only get up to go to the toilet and to shower. That's it.
Imagine for a second, 7 weeks pregnant, 3 young children under 5 to look after, and then being told that you had to stay in bed to save your child's life. It was almost an impossible situation.
The longer it went on, the worse it got. Every night, Nathan would shower me at home. We put a stool in the shower that I'd sit on, and the children would come and sit in bed next to me. My youngest, Patrick, he was 1 at the time. He was actually still breastfeeding, and we very quickly had to wean him and get him off for the sake of the baby growing inside me. And yeah, it was really hard because I could hear what was going on around me at home. I could hear my children playing. I could hear them laughing. I could hear them crying, but I couldn't get up to get to them. It's very easy to begin to feel like you're a burden on the people around you as well, because I couldn't do self-care for myself. I couldn't cook or clean. I did try and sleep through a lot of it. I cried every day. I tried to hide that from my children.
Rachel felt like she was on the outside of her old life, looking in, but not allowed to join in. And soon, the physical nature of bed rest caught up to her emotional wounds.
By, I think it was around 10 or 11 weeks, because I'm lying flat the whole time, it's not a good position for your body to be in 24/7. I woke up one morning and everything was spinning. The room was spinning, and it was horrific. Like, I'm never going on a roller coaster again. So it was the onset of vertigo, and I had never experienced vertigo before. I didn't know what was happening. It was incredibly frightening. I then started, because of the dizziness, I started to vomit, and I vomited so much that Nathan had to take me to emergency. The movement of the lurching forwards with the vomiting was terrifying, because I was told that any movement would be the beginning of the end.
5 weeks later, Rachel was allowed out of bed on a special outing to a dance shop to get her daughter's costumes fitted for their end-of-year dance recital. A simple, innocent wish, but one that Rachel will never forget.
Looking back, it was a silly thing to do, but I was desperately wanting to be the mum that my children knew and loved. So we planned it out perfectly, made sure there was minimal steps, and my mother drove. When I stood up to pay, I felt like I'd been hit on the back of the head with a baseball bat, and everything went black, and then the cramps started. And I just thought, oh God, I'm going to lose my baby now. My mum knew instantly there was something wrong because of the agony on my face. And she quickly bundled my girls into the car and drove us to hospital. When we got to the hospital, she left me in the car park. And then I heard this alarm, the siren go off. When I saw people rushing towards me, I realised it was for me. Doctors came out, they had a wheelchair. My mum took my girls and they raced me up. I was told then, if you're to lose your baby, you need to let go. You need to just let it happen. There's nothing we can do. You're too early in the pregnancy. But you can't tell a mum to let go. By the time Nathan got there, they were ready to do an ultrasound. By then I had started bleeding again quite heavily. But again, when they scanned, we found the heartbeat and we heard her heartbeat. The hematoma was still there alongside her, threatening her. But then I'd also developed complete placenta previa, which is where the placenta is low-lying, and it was the most severe form. So my obstetrician sent me home to strict bed rest again, and told me that hopefully by around the 18-week scan, things should settle down and I should be able to move about a bit.
And so it was back to Groundhog Day for Rachel. Back home, back to bed rest, back to watching her old life pass her by. But it was keeping her baby alive, and that was important. A few weeks later, she went for her 19-week scan, hoping to hear some good news, that she might be off bed rest for good.
When he put the scanner on my belly, we couldn't see the baby. The placenta had become an accretor, which is essentially where the placenta embeds too deeply into the uterine wall and it risks excessive bleeding for the mother at birth as well as premature birth. The longer the pregnancy goes on, the deeper the accretor gets. So the placenta is embedding further into the uterus. In some cases, as in mine, it can go straight through the uterus and attach to other organs as it seeks out a larger blood supply. I looked at the sonographer and I said, tell me the gender of our baby, because I needed something positive to hold on to. And he quickly scanned up and said it's a girl, and then went back to scanning the placenta, which was so big. It was like our little baby had this big placental cushion that she was perched on top of.
Rachel began to mistrust her body, wondering if it could stand another 4 months of this, wondering if her baby would be kept safe at all. Plans were quickly put in place for her early delivery.
When we saw the obstetrician following that appointment, he said that you will deliver early, 30 to 34 weeks, and you will also have a hysterectomy at birth to save your life. And that was quite shocking to hear at 31, that I was going to lose my uterus. And it very much made me question my identity as a woman. You know, the main goal was obviously to have our baby join us at the end of this and be healthy. But then I was also now having to grieve that I was going to lose a part of myself that I had valued so highly. Being a mum is the most precious gift to me. You know, how would this impact my relationship with my husband? Would he still be attracted to me? How would this change us? And how would it change me?
Rachel's plans were simple: keep her baby alive and keep herself alive. Rachel's baby continued to grow, but so did the placenta. And with every passing day, it became more dangerous for both Rachel and her baby.
So at 21 weeks gestation, in the middle of the night, as pregnant women do, I needed to go to the bathroom. When I stood up, all I saw was red, and there was just so much blood. I started to panic and cry. And when the paramedics came, they said, we need to take you to Westmead Hospital. When I got to hospital, that was the worst 24 hours of my life. They had me in labour ward, and I had a midwife telling me, again, to let her go. She kept saying, your baby's too small to be saved. If she comes now, we'll place her on your husband's chest until she takes her final breath, and we'll try and save your life. But we made it through that 24 hours, and they placed me onto a ward, and there I stayed. I was confined to a bed. I wasn't allowed to get up at all, apart from going to the toilet. The bleeding actually never stopped from that point, and it was a lot of blood every day. And I kept thinking, how can I be losing this much blood and the baby still be there? The whole point of continuing the pregnancy was to get to a point in time where it would be safe to deliver, where our baby had a fighting chance, but also where I had a fighting chance to survive as well. So it was a knife's edge the entire pregnancy, and the goalposts kept getting brought back. Initially, we wanted to get to 24 weeks because that's viability in New South Wales. That's the time at which they said they would step in and resuscitate our baby on delivery. But our obstetrician had goalposts of 34 weeks. Then it became, let's get to 32 weeks. Then it became, let's try and make 28 weeks. But it was almost like there was a ticking time bomb inside my belly, and we knew eventually it was going to go off.
A ticking time bomb in your own body. Imagine the fear for a second of every day. But Rachel turned to God and pleaded with him to help her through.
I did lean heavily into my faith in God during this time, but there were so many days where I just didn't have the physical or emotional strength to pray. And I just hoped that God knew that I wanted to pray, but there was nothing left. I was scraping the bottom of a barrel that was already broken. There would be days where I considered getting out of bed and walking the halls until I bled so much that they would be forced to deliver my baby, because I was so desperate to get home to my children. But then my baby, how could I do that to her? I'm her mum. I'm here to protect her. So I stayed completely still for her.
5 weeks passed. Rachel's eldest daughter, Bethany, started kindergarten. Rachel did Bethany's hair from the hospital bed. Her middle daughter, Amelia, brought her countless drawings from preschool, which she hung up on the hospital wall with blue tack. Rachel's youngest child, Patrick, was only 1. He cried when he saw his mum for the first few visits. He was scared of the tubes. But life, in its strange, heartbreaking way, it went on until that ticking time bomb finally went off.
I had this really bad lower back pain. Later that afternoon, my mum came in, and she's an ex-midwife and an ex-nurse, and she could see the agony across my face. So she went and got a midwife, and when they put the trace on, I was in active labour, active preterm labour. When I was put in the delivery room, the goal was to stop the contractions and to maintain the pregnancy. But by the time Nathan got in to my bedside, within a few hours, I just remember feeling really hot, and these contractions were so hideously painful that I kept thinking, if I'm contracting this hard, how has the blood not started? Because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't bleeding. But then I was also well aware that I hadn't felt our baby move for quite some time. And as I became more thirsty, I felt really hot. All of a sudden, our room filled. And it was at that point when they called ALS, which is life support, on both our baby and I, because they'd been running bloods and they found out that as my temperature was soaring and my heart was racing, I had become septic. So all of a sudden, there were all these doctors and nurses crowding our tiny delivery room, placing needles in. I had an arterial line sewn into my wrist without any anaesthetic, and they were prepping me for theatre. I just kept thinking, this can't be happening. My obstetrician's not here. And I was very panicked. And I turned to Nathan, and it was like there was this aura behind him, like this warm aura that I felt. And I was really panicked and scared. But then I heard these words going through my head. As I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. And I started to calm, and I just turned to Nathan and I said, tell my kids every day I love them. Promise you will tell them every single day that I love them and I love you. And then all of a sudden the wheels went into motion, and my bed was dragged down the hall into the operating theatre. I was lifted carefully and placed onto a cold, hard table. And at that point, I could feel warmth around my crutch and a sensation of liquid spilling over. And I knew that if I looked, I would psych myself out because I knew I would see red. So I tried to hold Nathan's gaze as long as possible. I thought, his eyes are the last things I want to see when I leave this earth. I had accepted at that point that I might not wake up, but I was very much hoping that my baby would be saved. And then 2 hands grabbed my head and said, you might lose a few days here. And then the anaesthetist looked at me and said, Rachel, I want you to keep your eyes open as long as possible. And I looked up at all these eyes looking down at me, and I saw green eyes, blue eyes, brown eyes, and then everything went black.
Rachel woke up the following day in ICU, where she'd find out if the last 26 weeks had been worth it.
I was in this white sterile room and I was strapped to a bed and I was intubated. A midwife that I've known since my first was born came and visited me, and she handed me a photo of Estelle. That was the first time I saw her. And I remember this midwife said, she looks just like you. And I thought, how can a baby that small look like anything? But she was beautiful.
Estelle, the missing piece to Rachel's family, her fourth child, was finally here and alive. But the troubles were far from over.
I didn't actually want to go see her. I was terrified of hurting her. I thought she was better off without me. I thought, what if she didn't know I was her mum? What if she didn't bond to me? It was hard to allow myself to become attached to a baby that I knew I might lose.
Rachel simply asked one question of the nurses and doctors when they came to visit. Is Estelle breathing? Once she knew the answer, she relaxed. But after a week, the staff began to become worried that she wasn't bonding with her daughter.
I'd been pumping breast milk for her and sending that down to NICU, but the nurses became concerned that I wasn't trying to see her, and they said, you really need to get up, you need to see her. And I thought, how can I get up? I had this massive cut right down my abdomen. My arms were still swollen and sore, and I was terrified to move. I was able to get up and have my first shower, but I was horrified at what I saw. I had it was like Frankenstein cut with staples down my belly, and the dressing was clear so you could see the entire wound in all its glory. And when I went to stand, I could barely hold my own weight. And I just said, I'm a patchwork bear monster. I just felt horrible. And I again thought, how is Nathan ever going to love me again? And how are my children going to react when they see me? When they'd come in to see me previously, I made sure the covers were up to my shoulders so they couldn't see anything.
Despite her fears, Rachel picked herself up, as she'd done time and time again for the past 27 weeks, and finally met her baby for the first time.
The protocol of the NICU is you need to scrub and sterilise your hands and your arms. So I'd done all of that. But when they opened the door, I saw the humidity crib and it was covered with a blanket. They try and emulate the womb. So they try and keep it as quiet as possible and as dark as possible. They lifted the cover and I just saw her tiny little legs stretch out and her little feet kick. And I just thought, that's what I felt inside my belly when she was there. She kicked me with those little feet. And then she started to cry. And I didn't actually realise a baby that little would cry. And all of a sudden, this mothering instinct just hit me. And I had to get her. I had to get to her. But they said, you can't hold her today. She's too weak, but you can put your hand through and you can touch her. So they opened the portal and I put my hand through and she grabbed onto my little finger and I sang to her and she soothed herself and she fell asleep. When she was born, she actually wasn't breathing. She'd gone blue. They nearly lost her. We nearly lost her. She was manually resuscitated and intubated and rushed to NICU. And it's incredibly lucky she was alive. Babies born at that gestation have lots of issues. So she was born with a hole in her heart. Her lungs weren't developed enough because she wasn't supposed to be out of the womb yet. And it was also a strange feeling seeing her because no one was meant to see her at that gestation. She was still supposed to be inside me. It's just absolutely incredible what these doctors and nurses can now do for these babies born so early and so critically unwell.
There's no doubt that the NICU saved Estelle's life. But as Rachel said to me in the interview, the end of my fight was the start of hers. And Estelle remained in the NICU for the next 12 weeks, while Rachel, the mum of a newborn, had to go home without her baby, discharged to an empty house.
When you have a baby in NICU, the mum goes home to an empty bassinet and a pumping station to pump breast milk, and it's an incredibly lonely, taxing journey to be on. And I don't think many people understand just how grueling it is. We were grateful for all the support we had around us and all the prayer from our local community. But it's almost like this general thought that once she was born, and even more once she was discharged and I was home from hospital, that the journey was over and that everything was okay. But that's not the case. Having a premature baby after they're eventually discharged from NICU, that's not the end of it. They have follow-up appointments. But also when a baby born that premature gets a virus that might see any other child with a cough and a runny nose, they often end up in hospital, and that's what happened with Estelle. She would be hospitalised on average once every 3 months for the first couple of years with things like pneumonia, sepsis, different illnesses that just hit her that much harder than the average child. But she's an incredibly strong fighter with just, now she's 5. She's always had this amazing personality.
Fast forward 5 years. What a journey Rachel, Estelle, and their family have had. It's impossible to not come out a different person from a journey like that. So I asked Rachel how the last 5 years had changed her life.
We don't take things for granted anymore. I know exactly how lucky we are. I'm so thankful for every day that we have. Don't get me wrong, I still have my days where it's really tricky. Kids will push your buttons. But I think we just appreciate so much more the little things, and it really pushed us to focus more on family time. And also, I'm a kind of person who I don't like to hand over control. I like to be in control. And in that situation, I wasn't in control at all. And that was really hard. And the only way I was able to cope was to accept that all my chapters have already been written by God, and He knew the end to the story. So there's nothing I could do to rewrite it in a different way anyway. So knowing that we have this faith in God and we can hand our worries over to Him and know that it is His plan, and just given us a new perspective in terms of just being grateful even for the mundane.
That was the story of Rachel Taufer. I want to thank Rachel for sharing her journey with me so vulnerably and with such poise. If this story brought up feelings of grief for you, SANS is a miscarriage, stillbirth and newborn death support organisation with a 24/7 bereavement hotline. You can call 1300 308 307 or visit sans.org.au, and that information is also in the show notes. You can follow Rachel on Instagram at Mummy Minute, and she is also an avid blood donor, with blood donations saving both her and her daughter Estelle's lives during delivery. You can check your eligibility and nearest donor centre at donateblood.com.au. If you or someone you know has a story of hope to share and you'd like to be interviewed for the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. You can leave a comment on the Finding Hope page at hopepodcasts.com.au. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to get future episodes in your feed and tell a friend about it. Next week, we'll meet someone who's using burgers to change lives. Yes, that's right, you heard that correctly. I'll leave you with this Bible verse, which I believe encapsulates Rachel's journey perfectly. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Catch you next time.
This is a Hope 1032 production. Thanks for listening.